name is Rachael Walsh. I've worked in the area of digital marketing for 15 years now, so it's an area I'm quite passionate about. A lot of that time has been spent working with tourism businesses, and so I suppose I really understand the challenges that you are facing at the moment, and my goal for today is to provide you with some practical tips and solutions that will help you move your business forward. So that might be new ways that you can communicate with your audience, or it could also be potentially creating new revenue streams through digital means. So what you see on this slide is just a synopsis of what we're going to be covering today. So how to manage your digital communications during the current crisis, how your business should behave online at the moment. You know, people are worried that they might say the wrong thing, so we're going to have a look at that. Ways that you can take your business online. So a lot of you maybe are, you know, you might have a website, but you might not have ever sold online. So we're going to look at ways that you can start selling, whether it's a product or a service that you offer through digital means, and different technologies that will be available. We'll start off with some tips on how we can behave online during this crisis. So obviously you don't need me to remind you, this is completely unprecedented. We've never experienced anything like this before. So what I always like to do is draw people back to the core of any business, and that is our customers. So who are our customers? What are their needs and wants? So the basics of any marketing strategy is understanding your customers and what their needs and wants are, and presenting a solution that will fulfill those needs and wants. So what we need to be careful about now is how are our customers' needs and wants evolving. So the needs and wants that they previously had have now evolved to something different given the current climate. So you know, we need to understand, first of all, our customers' needs and wants and how they've changed, and then also the channels that are available to us at this time. So I've categorized these into 3 areas. So your paid channels are the channels that you use usually to go out and find new customers. So it could be paid ads on Google, paid ads on social media, display advertising, video advertising, and so on. Then your owned channels would be the channels that you have immediate control over, such as your website, maybe a blog that you have on your website, your social media channels, even a customer database that you might have. And then your earned channels, or your earned media, is what other people are saying about you. So this could include collaborations with bloggers, content that is generated by your users, such as reviews and so on. So it's important, I suppose, at the moment that we understand what levers to pull from these paid, owned and earned channels. Some of them will be appropriate and some of them might not be appropriate. And again, it will vary from business to business, depending on the type of people that you are targeting. It is recommended, I suppose, at the moment that paid activity is limited or paused. The reason being is that if you are, you know, for example, an accommodation provider, and you're running a paid ad campaign on Google Ads, you are spending your marketing budget without getting a return on that investment, because you know you're not generating sales, shall we say, at the moment. So you could consider limiting or pausing your paid activity at the moment. If you do decide to keep your paid activity running at this time, it is important that you steer away from a hard sell, and that you know take maybe more of a softer approach in the messaging that you're using. So again, it's all down to the message that you're sharing and how appropriate it is for the people that you're targeting. So if we know the channels that are available to us, how do we make the decision about you know, which of those levers to pull, as I was saying? So again, it all comes back to understanding your customers, listening to what your customers are saying, and taking that into consideration, adapting your strategy accordingly, and then communicating that to your customers. So if we take a look at the first step, which is listening, and I'm sure a lot of you do this anyway, but it's listening to how your customers' needs and wants have evolved. So how can we do that? You know, we could spend a lot of money hiring a market research agency to conduct some primary research with our audience, or we can use digital channels to try and uncover some of that for ourselves. So we can use things like social listening, which is basically just a fancy word for listening to what people are saying on social media. So you could type in your business name into Twitter, for example, and you can see whether people are making positive reference to your business, negative reference. You can set up Google Alerts to monitor mentions of your brand. You can also monitor hashtags that are specific to this current environment, like hashtag COVID-19, hashtag coronavirus. See what people are actually saying with regards to what is happening, when they want to see businesses open, what kind of pressure are consumers putting on the governments to put plans in place, and so on. Also monitoring your social media channels. So for example, if you're a restaurant or a cafe, and maybe you've been closed this entire time, you're not sure when you might be able to open again, but you might decide that you want to offer takeaway food, or you might want to start selling some of your produce online. Ask your customers on social media for feedback. Tell them what you're planning on doing and gauge their reaction from there. So listen to what they want and then provide a solution or a service that matches what they actually want. So once you've heard your customers and you understand what they want, then it's up to us as business owners to adapt our strategies accordingly. So this might mean adapting how you sell. So if you were previously a premises where I had to walk in and pick I don't know, my favorite cake off of a shelf, you could adapt that now to potentially sell some of your products through digital means, so via a website or even via social media. So it's understanding, number one, if your customers are open and willing to accept that, and number two, if you have the capabilities to actually do that. And I'll be talking through that throughout the next slides. The other area that you may need to adapt is your marketing activity. So obviously, we've recently learned that accommodation providers in Northern Ireland can open now on July 20th, I believe it is. So now that we have a lead-in time to opening, how do we adapt our marketing mix to make sure that we're ready to go for that open date? So it's looking again at your customers. So previously your customers might have been an international audience. Your customers are now a domestic audience. So it's adapting your marketing mix accordingly. So number one, are those channels that you've chosen appropriate for that domestic audience? Number two, is your messaging appropriate for that domestic audience? So, this would involve literally going through your website, making sure that any messaging that you have on your website is appropriate for domestic audiences, or you have a specific landing page on your website that's appropriate for that audience. And incorporating a message that is meaningful for a domestic audience into any of your marketing activity, paid or unpaid. And then the third step is to actually communicate. And, we're so far into the crisis now, I'm sure you've all kind of opened up the communication gates at this stage. But previously, I had seen some other tourism businesses that I was working with. And obviously, the tourism industry has been hit hard by this. But the worst thing that you can do at the moment is to go dark, which is what some businesses that I have been working with were doing. And when I say going dark, I mean, just stop posting on social media, stop communicating via your website, stop speaking to your customers via email. That's exactly what you don't want to do, because you need to be open and clear with your customers about what's happening, what preparations are you doing in the background to open, how are you preparing for reopening, what are you doing, how can you make sure that your customers are involved in that conversation and that you can address any concerns, for example, that they might actually have. So it's important that those lines of communication are kept open at all times. So with that being said, I suppose that's just to kind of set the scene. Obviously, what I'm telling you are giving you are some tips for your business, but really it comes down to understanding your customers, understanding the market that you operate in, and then adapting accordingly and communicating accordingly. So I'm just going to take you through some ways that you could potentially get your business online. So from my experience working with tourism businesses, that is like the first question that people have asked me. So potentially you might have, maybe you don't have a product, like a physical product that you can sell. Maybe it's an experience that you're selling. So you might be an outdoor experience business. So how can you replicate that kind of experience in an online setting? So the first thing that you must decide is, number one, do I want to sell? So am I at the stage of this crisis where I can actually start selling again? And number two, do I want to raise awareness? So if I can sell, do I want to tell people, okay, well, actually, we now have a date for opening, so I'm going to start raising awareness of my business with a new market, which could be a domestic market that you have previously never targeted before. So do I want to now start raising awareness with those? Or is it a combination of both? So do I want to sell and raise awareness? And I just want to, I suppose, touch on a point here that's really, really important. Obviously, you know, for a business to survive, we all survive on revenue that is generated. But I would really, really encourage you not to skip, probably step 2 should be in the first box there, but the awareness phase is so important before you get into the selling phase. So remember that, you know, there's a shift now in your consumer. So you need to almost do a job of raising awareness with them and telling them who you are and what you do before you get into selling with them. So we have, like, you know, if you're an accommodation provider, we have about 6 weeks, I think it is, until opening. I would not advise you jump straight into selling. I would advise that you start a brand awareness campaign and then ease into your selling after that. So take the time over the next couple of weeks to think about how that might look and maybe use a combination of both of those. If you don't have a date for opening, you might just want to focus on the brand awareness activity and, you know, let people know who you are, what you do, and so on. So if we look at the first example of selling, and we want to sell online. So I'm going to use an example to kind of bring this to life. And there's lots of different ways that we can sell online. So I'm using an example of Whitewater Brewery. So you might be familiar with Whitewater Brewery. They're based in County Down. They're an award-winning brewery. Their beer is absolutely delicious, so I would encourage you to check it out. And they're a family-run business. So they have a website. They are unique in the fact that they have a product, so they're bottles of beer, and they have an experience, so a tour of their facility. So they can sell both a product and an experience. So how can they do that? So if we take the product first and foremost, well, they have a website. So an obvious solution here would be for them to create an e-commerce platform that links in with their website. So you may have heard of a platform called Shopify. So Shopify is a place where you can create a catalog of your products. You can link it to your website. You can set up a shop on your website, and then payment can be taken via Shopify. You can also use another platform called WooCommerce, which again does the same thing. It creates like an inventory of your products in the back end of your website, and it allows you then to set up a shop and sell your products online. So Whitewater Brewery could do this. They could use a plugin like Shopify, for example, and they could be up and running within a week. These e-commerce platforms are very quick to set up. If you already have a website, especially, you don't have to go through the stage of setting up a website. So they've decided to set up their shop. What do they do next? Well, they need to tell people that the shop actually exists. So obviously you would use your other channels like social media to drive traffic to your website where people can buy your products. But on your website, it's also really important that you make it very clear where the shop is. So potentially having a button on the homepage that is maybe a different color that's not associated with the brand. So I've used red here, so it grabs people's attention. If you offer free delivery, for example, you might put a little message at the top of the homepage as well to highlight that. And you'll see that there's a little paragraph of text at the bottom of the screen, which highlights the fact that this is a family-run business and that is keeping the tradition of brewing alive in the Mourne Mountain region where the brewery is actually located. So again, it's reinforcing the fact that not only are you buying a product that you hopefully will enjoy, but you're also supporting a local business, which is really important during this time as well. So if you are going to start selling via your website, the other thing that you need to be sure that you're doing is communicating clearly your policies for shipping delivery, and so on. So being clear about your COVID-19 policies on all of your digital channels, specifically on your website. So how does a customer place an order? When should they expect their order? What happens if something goes wrong? How can I return my order, and so on? So this is just an example of a shipping policy that you could have on your website. So I'm showing you this, I suppose, because a business like Whitewater, and potentially there's some of you listening out there that might be in this position as well, they've never sold online before. So it might be the last thing that you'd be thinking about, writing a shipping policy or returns policy. But I would encourage you to put the time into doing this, simply because it just means if anything goes wrong, you have, you have something to fall back on. Also be clear that this is an evolving situation. So your shipping policy, your return policy may vary as well post COVID-19. So these are just examples. You can find other examples online as well, but they're just kind of a guide for you to follow. So again, I'm conscious that a lot of you listening potentially don't have a product to sell. So maybe you have an experience that you offer. And just like Whitewater, they have a product, but they also have an experience. So they could use a platform such as Zoom. So obviously we're all on Zoom today for this webinar, but Zoom is also a really, really useful platform to replicate an experience in an online situation. So for example, Whitewater Brewery could offer virtual beer tasting via Zoom. So they could run a series about how to correctly taste your beer. They could maybe, if they had experimental beers, they could do beer tastings with the experimental beers as well, or meet the brewers section as well. So there's lots of different things you can do via Zoom. Another brewery, not Whitewater, but another brewery that I've worked with has actually, well, first of all, they never had an e-commerce platform. So they've done what I've just suggested there. They've created a new revenue stream by selling their products online, which is now generating more revenue than they ever had before COVID-19. It's opened up new markets to them. So they're not only selling locally, they can now sell nationally. And what they do as well is sometimes they put a note into the order that is going out to a customer with a link to a Zoom meeting where they invite people to come on and they talk about the beer that they're sampling. So it's a really nice way of bringing the product and the experience together in an online situation. So yeah, I would encourage you, I suppose, to explore Zoom and everything that it has to offer, and think about, what from your offline experience can you bring into an online situation. Another area that I'll just touch on as well is Facebook Shop. So you may have seen this in the last week or two. Facebook have now announced that you can sell directly from your Facebook page. So this is going to be really useful for any of you out there that don't have a website. You can now create a product catalog on your Facebook page, and you can take payments directly through your Facebook page, so through a PayPal account or through a Stripe account. You can also link it to your website. So if you have an e-commerce website, you can link it to an e-commerce website. So say, for example, if you're using Shopify, you can start to take payments through Shopify as well. So this is really, really brilliant for any business who doesn't have the time to create a website, because it can be time consuming. And maybe has a really good following on their social media. It's now time to convert those followers into customers, and this is what your Facebook shop can do for you. And then potentially promote the products through paid ads as well to your existing audience. Let them know that your shop is up and running and that they can buy their products directly from you. So again, a really, really interesting and new tool and made available from Facebook. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And a question that I guess asked all the time is, okay, if we've set up our e-commerce shop, we're offering, different experiences via Zoom. We've set up our Facebook shop. How do we tell people that it exists? And yes, we can do that through our owned and earned media, which is activity that we don't pay for. But paid media is really useful when you're trying to obviously sell something. So reintroducing your paid media at the right time is crucial. And again, the right time for everyone is going to be different. I'm going to use the example again of accommodation providers simply because we now know the lead-in time to opening. So really, there's 3 stages you're going to go through. So you have your lead-in time to opening, you have your day of opening, and then you have everything after that. So you almost need to adapt your message through each of these stages. So it's communicating, the services or the products that you're making available to customers now in the lead into opening, and then adapting that message, encouraging people to come back and visit your physical premises once you do actually open. If you don't have a date for when you're going to be opening, or you're not sure about when to activate your paid media, I would highly encourage you to use scenario planning. So scenario planning is just a fancy word for looking at the different possibilities and creating a plan for each of those possibilities. So yes, it is time consuming, but it would be very beneficial to make sure that you're ready to go once you do know your opening date. So again, the paid activity, there is no, I suppose, right time for every business. What I would suggest you look at is, okay, what date am I potentially going to be opening, and work back from there. And again, reiterating what I've already said earlier, don't jump straight into selling via your paid activity. Remember that the market has changed, your consumers have changed, so you need to adapt. You almost need to adapt your value proposition from what it previously was, because remember, what your customers wanted previously is now completely different. So do your customers need to be reassured that it's safe to visit your premises? Do your customers need to be told about how you're going to practice social distancing in the premises, and so on? So incorporate those messages into your paid activity as well, and reassure your customers during that time, or during this time, I should say. So those are just some examples of how to sell online. If you are focusing more so on the brand awareness side of things, so how can we do that? So we have our owned media, like I've already mentioned, which is our website, our blog, our social media, and so on. And then we have our earned media, which is what everyone else is saying about us. So brand awareness and telling people who we are and what we do is a really important step in the process in order to converting customers, which is obviously our end goal. Our end goal is always to convert customers and generate revenue. So what I suggest you would do is, like I said, review your owned media. So look at your website. Is my messaging and my content appropriate for this domestic market that I'm potentially going to be targeting? Can I create blogs on my website to reassure my customers that I'm set up for social distancing when they are going to visit again? And then looking at how other people can amplify that message for you. So partnering with the likes of bloggers, which I know send a chill down people's back when I mention bloggers, but they can be useful, and they don't always have to be celebrities. Influencers or bloggers can also be industry leaders. You potentially could be an influencer yourself within your region, so if you have a large following, or potentially you could partner with other businesses in the area, and you can start to amplify each other's message. Because remember, consumers will they're going to visit areas, so they're not just going to stay in a hotel, for example, and not do anything else. They're interested in finding out about things to do in a region and so on. So, it's time, I suppose, for businesses to kind of get together and start to support each other. So now is a really good time to do that. The other thing that I would recommend you do actually at this time is looking at your databases. And I know my colleague Julie is going to be doing a webinar on that in the next week or so, where she's going to look at CRM databases and what you can do with them during this time. But what I would suggest you do is, okay, it might be difficult for us to go out and identify new markets and find new customers. But if you have a database of customers who have previously stayed with you, or previously visited your premises, or previously participated in an experience that you have, now is the time to gather that data, clean the data, and start communicating with those people and inviting them to return once you open. So social media can be a really useful tool to raise brand awareness, and hopefully, if you haven't gone dark during this time, you are sharing content to remind us all what we're missing. So be your customer's eyes. So this is just an example of Montalto Gardens, and they were closed at a particular time, and people couldn't visit. So they were constantly sharing content of new flowers in the garden, or new growth that was appearing, or different wildlife that was being seen, and so on. So again, be your customer's eyes. Share things that your customers would normally see if they were visiting you or experiencing what you have to offer. The other thing that you could also look at is user-generated content. And encouraging users to create content on your behalf. So what I mean by user-generated content is using your fans or your followers to promote you as a business. So this can be done through reviews, so reviews on Google Reviews or TripAdvisor, for example, or potentially asking them to, if they're posting on social media, to use a hashtag that you have for your business. So reviews are really, really useful. Number one, for brand awareness. Also, they're really useful, Google reviews in particular, for SEO. And I'll talk a bit about SEO. So that's about ranking your website in the search engines. So if, for example, you're sending an email out to a database of customers who have previously visited your business, at the end of that email, you could potentially ask them to leave you a review on Google or TripAdvisor. So again, encouraging engagement and getting users to spread and amplify your message on your behalf. If during this time you've been doing any CSR activity, now would be a good time to highlight that on social media. So, you know, what we're doing now, we will be remembered for in the future. So, you know, say how you've been helping the local community or the local area, anything that you've been doing during this time to help people. Highlight that on your social media. Again, this can really help generate a positive sentiment towards your brand and improve brand awareness as well. And then bloggers and influencers. Again, people tend to, like I said, shiver when I mention bloggers and influencers, but they can be really, really useful when used correctly. So if you've previously used influencers or bloggers in your marketing strategy, I would suggest that you reach out to them. A lot of influencers and bloggers are actually offering free mentions for brands. So if they've collaborated with you in the past, that they will, you know, maybe highlight a new service that you're offering, or if you're starting to sell online, that they would highlight this for you. So contact any bloggers that you would have previously worked with and ask them for their help. Or if you are new to the world of influencer marketing, now is the time to identify potential partnerships that you could have in the future, because you're going to need as much support as possible to you know, raise awareness of what you do with new markets. So identifying influencers in a particular area that already have a significant following will be really useful to help with your brand awareness activity. So we'll talk about bloggers. Again, a question came in on that, but it's just, again, a really useful tool from a brand awareness perspective. So if we then look at what is going to happen post-COVID-19, and I suppose when I say post-COVID-19, I mean once we open. Obviously, COVID-19 is going to be with us for some time, but we need to, I suppose, understand how we're going to communicate differently post-COVID-19 or once we open our doors. So again, this is going to go back to what I was talking about, you know, the 3 steps about listening, adapting, and communicating. So, you know, we don't really need to do a listening exercise to understand that customer health and safety is going to be a top priority once we open our doors again. So it's understanding customers' concerns and then addressing those concerns. So an example of that would obviously be how you're going to manage social distancing. Now, if you're an outdoor experience, obviously you won't have to consider that. But if you're an outdoor experience where people use, you know, bikes, for example, so maybe it's mountain biking, you would have to consider sanitization. So how are you going to clean the bikes after they've been used? So again, it's thinking about your business and the health and safety concerns that your customers are going to have, and then communicating that both in the lead up to opening and also, you know, after you've opened. So again, this can be done simply by posting on your social media. So this is just an example of a distillery who are highlighting that your safety is our priority. We're changing how we do things in order to ensure our customers' safety at all times. And then they're explaining exactly what they're doing. So this is, you know, in reference to people who would visit the distillery for a tour. So they have markings on the floor where people can stand so that they're 2 meters apart. They clean the glasses after use and so on. The distillery is sanitized after people have visited as well. So if you haven't thought about that for your business, I would highly encourage you to think about it and then build that into your digital marketing communications. Because like I was saying, that value proposition that we all, like every business has a value proposition. This is who we are and this is what we're selling. Your value proposition is probably going to have to adapt slightly based on the current climate. So again, it's listening to your customers and adapting to their needs and their evolving needs and wants. And I suppose I would just like to point out as well, if you think back to when this all started, and the supermarkets were opened. Think about the first supermarket that you visited after the pandemic started. We were all drawn to the businesses that were clear about their health and safety. They have protective screens for their staff. They had sanitizer at the door. They had gloves available, and they had no produce on display, so people couldn't be picking them up. So think about your own life and how you chose where you were going to go once this pandemic kicked off, and what was important to you. You need to now address that within your business for your customers and communicate it clearly through your digital marketing. And then obviously we have to adapt to a new normal. So I hate that word, a new normal, but it's kind of what's been bandied about at the moment. So if you have taken the steps to get your business online, you have generated a new revenue stream. You've also opened yourself up to a wider market. So, for Whitewater Brewery, maybe they were only selling their beer in the local area. Now they potentially sell to anyone all over the island of Ireland. So, if you've taken the steps to start selling online, make sure that you're incorporating that into your strategy once you've opened your doors again. And that's where you can get back to your paid activity, and you can start promoting your shop, or you can start promoting the virtual experiences that you're selling. And remember, I suppose, we're all focused on when can we get back here, and when can we visit here, and when can we do this, and when can we do that. But the reality is that some customers are going to be nervous when restrictions are eased. So some customers will still want to buy their beer online, or they'll want to buy their favorite food from their local restaurant online. They might not want to come into the premises. So, don't just shut down these new revenue streams. Look at them. Obviously, we're reacting to a situation now, but sit back when you have the time and look at what has worked and what you can adapt, because you could have just created a new revenue stream for your business that you didn't even know existed. And then just finally, I suppose, just to touch on again the fact that a successful digital marketing strategy is all about understanding your customers' evolving needs and wants. So again, the tips that I've given you are all well and good, but really it's understanding what's appropriate for your audience, and then adapting your marketing communications, or adapting how you sell your product to meet those needs and wants of your customers. So if any of you were on at the previous webinar that my colleague Julie did, you would have been introduced to this action plan. So again, it's all fine for us to sit on a webinar and to listen to all of these different tips, but unless we formulate it into an action plan, nothing will actually get done. So this is just an action plan that you can use. So what I would encourage you to do is take this template and write down 3 things or 3 actions you can take from today. So even if that action is, deciding on whether you're going to do brand awareness or selling, or deciding, to set up a product catalog via a Facebook shop, or your action is going to look at ways that you can, use Zoom to promote the experience that you offer. Write those actions down and when you're going to do them. So again, it's really important, I suppose, that we take action from this in order to see some results.